You may have noticed in life that you tend to have these ups and then these crashes and these ups and these crashes. And the only way to get off the roller coaster is to understand what is happening energetically. And completing the cycle on positive and negative emotions is really, really powerful. Hello and welcome back to Empowering From Within. I'm so happy to have you here. Today, we're going to talk about being an old soul and energetic laws and emotions mastering in the context of other people. So I can make a pretty educated guess that if you're interested in this podcast and you're listening to the information that I like to share, then you are an old soul. And old souls are kind of playing by different rules. I often use the analogy that we are in a PhD tertiary situation with our lives, and younger souls are more in like a kindy environment. And that does not mean that we are more, valuable, special, important than kindy souls, because as you can imagine, a kindy kid is the most precious, treasured, wonderful thing in the world, and a PhD student is equally as lovable, valuable, and treasured, but they're just in completely different curriculums. And so you are most likely an old soul if you are drawn to information like this. I find that old souls often realize that the mainstream solutions are not helpful to their old soul problems. You can feel a bit gaslit when you are going to a psychologist, a textbook, an institution, a Western medical doctor, and you have a sense that there is something else going on underneath the surface, and they are just dishing up solutions that would be better for a kindy kid that would work on a kindy kid. But old souls tend to need to keep searching and hunting for information that is going to help alleviate their problems, and it's part of the design. And I know in my cells that we are here to grow and expand, and it's all about our consciousness and our energy and mastering ourselves to master our lives. And old souls are really, really good at helping everyone else and overserving and feeling everyone else's emotions and giving them all the solutions they need, but they're not as good at doing that for themselves. And that is part of our hero's journey, is to start to give what we are really good at giving everyone else to ourselves. And then we're able to serve from a full tank and without some of the painful beliefs and limitations that we pick up along the way, because we are so sensitive to energy and people's thoughts and emotions. And so today I want to talk about some of the energetic laws that are really, really helpful for old souls, and also about our emotions mastery in the context of other people, and how it can be really helpful to master our emotions and complete cycles without dumping onto other people or, impacting our loved ones' energy, and how to sort of protect your energy when someone is dumping onto you. And I come from a long history of dumping. Like, I was the queen of calling someone when I was stressed, calling up my mom in a time of crisis and just dumping all my problems onto her. And it wasn't really helpful, to be honest. And I'm sure she would say she's really good at doing the same to me and needing me to regulate her as well. So not the most optimal way to live our life. So yes, old souls. Old souls often find that they come to this kind of information about energy through certain pathways when they're, if you have a large spiritual awareness and a sort of very sensitive energy, you're going to start getting interested in things like astrology, horoscopes. These are usually the gateway drugs into the really, really helpful salient information that we need in order to master ourselves and master our lives. Manifestation and, certain religious text and understanding, and just being able to trust yourself enough to know that the mainstream textbook information is limited and not actually addressing what you can sense and feel. So the energetic laws and understanding that we are all energy and consciousness and potential operating in this field of awareness and these sort of larger fields of energy is so helpful, because when you're only trying to play the physical game, which old souls get really, really good at. We get really good at understanding like how to treat people, how to achieve stuff, how to play the physical game, but we're not as good at, the energetic game until we are lucky enough to have more information and knowledge about what is actually happening in our energetic world. So I want to talk about the energetic law of highs and lows. I like to call it the law of roller coasters. And you may have noticed in life that you tend to have these ups and then these crashes, and these ups and these crashes. And the only way to get off the roller coaster is to understand what is happening energetically. Because, a true state of equilibrium is what helps to sustain an energetic system. So every single atom has an equal amount of positive and an equal amount of negative charge. So literally everything in the world and our lives has an equal amount of negative and an equal amount of positive. And it is when we get out of balance and we can only see the positive or we can only see the negative that the universe, life, and the energy fields around us need to tip us back into equilibrium. If the world didn't have an equal amount of positive and negative, it would literally tip off its axis. And for some reason, as we grow up as children and teens and young adults, we are taught that like things are entirely bad and that's wrong and that's negative, or that these things are wholly good and these things are 100% positive. And when we lose the perspective that everything is always both and equally both, then we tip out of balance, and the energy around us has no choice but to tip us back into balance. So as we've discussed on earlier podcasts about emotions mastery, like the different emotions we have different energetic frequency and resonance. So the survival emotions like fear, anger, guilt, shame, grief, these all calibrate at a different level of consciousness. And we don't want to eliminate these emotions from our lives, because if we are crossing the road, we are going to have an understanding of fear in order to keep ourselves alive. Like we are having a human experience and we need these survival emotions in order to survive. But when we get into a survival emotion because our phone dings with an email, that is an example of not being mastered with your emotions and having your fight or flight kick in for a situation where you don't need it. Likewise, the higher emotions like elation, happiness, joy, love, compassion, these are all really, really helpful emotions too, and part of the human experience. But if we are in complete elation, like cloud 9, left our body with joy, and we're crossing the road and we hear a car hurling towards us, we are not going to be able to save our lives. So our souls want us to have both emotions in order to master our lives and to master ourselves. And the problem is that we tip out of balance without having any mastery over it. And I'm sure, everyone has the experience of getting that excellent news or going on a trip of a lifetime, and suddenly we are so elated and then crash. Something happens and we just come crashing back down. That is the law of highs and lows in play, because energy wants you to be stable and in an equilibrium, neutralized state. And we can empower ourselves and start to master situations we walk into by consciously being aware of this law and accommodating for the highs and lows and getting ourselves into a state of equilibrium. And one of the ways we can do that is by completing the cycle on our emotions. It is nobody else's responsibility to handle our emotions once we are an adult and individuated. It is nobody else's. It is not your husband's fault, your parents' fault, your children's fault or responsibility to help you feel any type of way. That is totally on us. And once we take it into our own hands and take radical responsibility for how we feel, our relationships become so much more harmonious, and we can go into conversations with an intention. So if you are feeling really, really, really down and something terrible has happened, or you are like very triggered, your energy wants to complete that cycle, right? So this is where we start to have repeating patterns of emotions because we never completed the cycle. And so the trigger keeps getting tripped up and we haven't connected it and we haven't completed the cycle. So, and instead of just like running from it, avoiding it, numbing it away, it is so much better to face it, address it, and complete that cycle. And when we go into a conversation, when we have been triggered, and I'm going to give you a tool and a skill to complete the cycle. But once we go into a conversation and we go, hey, do you have capacity to give me some reassurance because I really need just someone to tell me everything's going to be okay? Or we go in and say, can you help me see this from a different angle because I'm feeling really stressed about this thing? Then the person can get their energy right and be braced to either say, look, no, I'm super stressed too, I can't actually help you. Brilliant. Or yes, of course. And suddenly they're primed and prepped and ready to communicate with you in such a better way than if you go in triggered, emotional, you don't even know what you want, and the other person can't help you if you haven't completed the cycle. So some of the ways to complete the cycle: get your phone out and open up your voice recorder and just start spewing your triggers into a voice note and tell the story over and over and over and over again until all the gas is out of the balloon and it's no longer charged for you, and you can listen back and feel neutral about it. That's completing the cycle. Writing a like ridiculously angry letter to the world or to someone who has, you believe, wronged you, and getting it all out and dumping it into a piece of paper or a Word document is so much better than dumping it onto someone else. And that will complete the cycle so that it doesn't need to keep going off like an alarm in your body, like, hey, don't forget you're upset about this, don't forget you're upset about this. Likewise, for really positive things, sometimes when we are riding on a high and we just got some amazing news, and let's say we got the job or we got the promotion, and we suddenly call literally 10 people in our phone to say, oh my God, this amazing thing just happened. I'm sure you've had this experience where by the time you get home and you tell your loved ones and they're like, how was your day? You're like, yeah, it was pretty good. But the cycle has completed, like you've got the excitement out. And it helps in an energetic sense to be more conscious of this. And sometimes it helps when you get really, really good news or something goes really, really well, to just sit with it for a few days and keep it inside without necessarily letting all the air out of the tire and telling every single person you know, because it will naturally stabilize in your energy and you'll be able to hold on to it longer and it will be able to settle in your reality rather than being on such a high that you have to be brought down. And I'm sure you've had like this amazing idea before, we've all done it, where you call like your best friend and you're like, oh my God, I have the greatest idea for a business, and they're like, that's never gonna work, and they crash you back down. So I had a client a few weeks ago who was getting into, she said I could share this, was getting into a lot of arguments with her husband. Every single time she came home, they would get into a really difficult energy and difficult emotion and difficult argument. And I could see this law at play because she is so fulfilled by her work and she's like truly on her purpose in life. And she would have these exceptional, exquisite days at work and feel on such a high, and then walk in the door and the energy field and the energy that was now the system of her and her family would have to crash her back down and equalize her into a state of equilibrium. So in order to get around this, she started to play with, before she walked in that door, bringing down her energy and seeing that work was not 1000% positive and that going home is not going to be 1000% negative, and equalizing internally her own perceptions of her work day and her home life. And that meant that her husband didn't have to come in and subconsciously follow the energetic instructions of her field being so high that he had to crash her back down. So having a mastery of this energetic law of highs and lows and completing our own cycles gives us so much more empowerment as we go about our day, because we're not like this leaf in the wind that is being blown around by the energy around us, and we become the mighty oak tree that has the consciousness to see what energetic state we're in and neutralize or equalize to get back into a state of balance. So being really hyper aware of the positives and negatives in every situation, even in every person. When we can only see the flaws in someone, we are out of balance. Or when we can only see the flaws in ourselves and the flaws as a bad thing, we are out of balance. And emotions are genuinely contagious. Energy spills out and spills forth all day, every day. And I'm sure we've all been in like a work environment or a family environment where someone enters the room with a heavy, stressed emotion, and it brings the tone of the room down. And that is us literally catching their energy and their emotion. So if you operate in the world with a mastery of your own energy, then you can walk into situations and never be the one to infect your negative, triggered survival emotions onto other people. And when you start to master yourself, you start to see in other people so much more easily the emotions that they're carrying around. And that becomes like a shield, because you can see that this has nothing to do with you, or they're having their own emotional response, and you are less susceptible to catching their emotion and feeling what they're feeling when you can individuate and take care of your own energy and see other people's energy for what it is. So that is the law of highs and lows. That is the law of balance, and seeing and having perceptions that are fully informed of all the positives and all the negatives will change how you go about your day. The next time you have a really, really difficult emotional experience, I would invite you to complete the cycle solo, and to complete the cycle in your own time and in your own way before you take it to someone else and infect them. Because I'm sure we all have those friends who when you hang out with them, they're going to bring you down. Well, you can no longer be that friend, which is fabulous. And when someone else is dumping on you, you have the free will to say, I can see you're stressed. Can I talk to you when I'm feeling better, or when I have capacity to take this on? And when you get hyper aware of whether you're either dumping or being dumped on, it can make your relationships and your friendships and your family dynamics a lot more harmonious, because you are no longer just feeling and sensing all the contagion and the dumping, but you pull yourself out of it and you see it from like a helicopter view of what's happening, and it makes you take everything much less personally, and it makes you have this incredible sense of resourcefulness that you can handle all your own stuff and you can handle all your own triggers. So completing the cycle on positive and negative emotions is really, really powerful. Mastering your own equilibrium and not waiting for life to crash you down is really, really helpful. And pulling yourself out of the game of dumping and being dumped on is really helpful. And going into communication with our loved ones in a really intentional space is going to give you the gift of a much elevated experience when you understand what's happening with the energy around you. So first energetic law, the law of highs and lows, the law of balance. And if you need help processing really difficult emotions or childhood wounds or limiting programs, if you need help shifting your perceptions, I got you. This is the work I do in my sessions: emotions mastery, self-image healing, and energetic laws. And if you're an old soul and you need support and information that is not in the mainstream, I also got you. And I would also just say that, like, this is what unconditional love is. It's love without conditions. this is true love. The love where you only see the positives isn't real love. Love is seeing the entire picture, seeing the positives, seeing the negatives, and loving without the condition of needing no negatives. So this is the most elevated high frequency way to operate in relationships and communication and within our own energy. And next week, I'm going to continue with the energetic laws, because the thing that nobody tells you is that the elites and the 1%ers, like, they know all these energetic laws. They operate within the laws. They are living their lives mastering energy. And the reason why it's not widely available is because not knowing them keeps us powerless. And people who are powerless and in survival emotions are much easier to control than people who are empowered and understand how to master their own emotions and their own energy without needing and to follow their own discernment and intuition without needing to outsource their authority to institutions, people in power, governments, etc., etc., etc. So the way we can get empowered is to master ourselves, master our lives. And it's one thing to know these laws, but it's another thing to integrate them and to fully have them front of mind and to actually do the exercises of completing the cycle. Because I knew this information for a while, but I didn't actually embody, integrate, practice, and do it until life got too hard, until life got so hard that it forced me. But you can be proactive, get ahead of your lessons getting louder by truly embodying and integrating this information. And I would love to know how you go. Thank you so much for being here today. If you want to keep hanging out, because I sure do, then head to my Instagram @PhoebesGram or my website, phoebestewart.com.